All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Star Wars Mark of Balance. My name is Mark, and today we're going to be talking about Bad Batch Season 3, Episode 9, Harbinger. I'll be up front with you guys, this was my least favorite episode of the season so far. I thought the pacing of this episode felt off. I thought the story threads that it was potentially setting up with Asajj Ventress, with Omega being Force sensitive. I'm going to do a whole rant on Asajj Ventress returning and being alive here, so stay tuned for that. I thought the dialogue was clunky as well throughout this episode. And finally, it ended with a Monster of the Week, which was just a slap in the face for me, because I really hoped that Bad Batch would have finally moved on from this type of storytelling by this point in the series, but it's still here, and it still relies on these big monsters to show up in an episode to cause tension between characters instead of just relying on the characters and their history to tell a compelling story. Are there things to enjoy about this episode? Yeah, the hand-to-hand fight choreography between Asajj Ventress and the Bad Batch was some of the best we've seen in Star Wars animation. Seeing her ignite her lightsaber and deflect their bolts was cool to see her have her yellow lightsaber in animation finally. The backgrounds and the landscapes are really great, but that's just about it. For me, story is always king, and I'm going to sound like a broken record, but this episode just felt off from start to finish. Asajj Ventress showing up and us diving directly into these Jedi-like tests that she runs on Omega and them having this pseudo-master-apprentice relationship by the end of the episode just felt unfounded on anything and forced together. And before I go any further, I do have to address the elephant in the room. Asajj Ventress is alive. She was revealed in the trailer, and I think a lot of the people that read the Dark Disciple book said, oh, maybe it's a flashback. Maybe it isn't going to completely undercut one of our favorite Star Wars books and completely ruin Asajj Ventress's redemption arc. No, they couldn't possibly do that. And then the creators came out and said, no, we promise we'll be in line with the Dark Disciple book. And I just don't see how that's going to happen at this point. Asajj Ventress sacrificed herself at the end of Dark Disciple. It was beautiful. It was such a great moment for her character. It completely closed out her arc that started in the Clone Wars. It was great. It was exactly what the character needed. It was the story Dave Filoni wanted to tell in animation, but unfortunately Disney canceled the Clone Wars before the arc could be adapted to animation, so they instead wrote the book that explained what the arc would be. A lot of people love the book. It tells the story of Quinlan Vos and Asajj Ventress working together to assassinate Count Dooku. It's a fantastic read. I'm sorry I spoiled it, but I know a lot of people are talking about it, and it gets me really fired up because I know a lot of people might say, oh, well, they brought Darth Maul back in animation, and it worked really well. Look how good that worked out. Darth Maul was a blank slate of a character, and he was simply there to be a cool obstacle for Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon Jinn to fight at the end of the movie. So there was no character there. They could just completely build out Darth Maul in any way they wanted to. Here, Asajj Ventress's death meant something. It was the full circle moment for her character going from Jedi Padawan to going to the dark side to then returning to more of a middle ground where she isn't a Jedi again, but she's turned her back on the Sith and she started to walk the right path again. And now you're saying that she might have multiple lives through, I'm assuming, some Night Sister magic? Like that line at the end when she's like, I've got a couple more lives. I just shook my head. It felt like fan fiction. You can make the argument that, oh, maybe they have some grand plans for her and it'll work out in a couple of years when she has her own series or her stories continued on in some different series, whatever it is. You can clip this, you can come back and tell me, oh, look, you were wrong about Asajj Ventress and then bring her back. And I'll totally take that. I don't care. I'm standing on this right now. I think this is a huge mistake. I think this is terrible to her character and what they told in the books. I think it completely ruins any canon that has been established in books because now it's saying, oh, yeah, well, those books didn't really matter. Like, yes, they're canon, but they're not really canon. They're not hard canon. We can kind of play around with those. And I know a lot of content creators have been saying this, like, oh, Star Wars books aren't getting that much respect. They're changing some things, but I feel like in the past, the changes that they've made from the books have been very minute in the grand scheme of things, but this is like a character assassination, essentially, because it undercuts this big moment in her character. And I don't think anything they're going to do later with her feels genuine to the original intent of how they wanted her story to end. It feels like they're shoehorning a known character in here. It feels like they just want to tell more stories with her. And I hate that because it disrespects the character. I mean, Star Wars simply doesn't know how to let people die anymore. It was so poetic that Asajj Ventress was this casualty of the Clone Wars. She was a casualty of the Jedi, and she was a casualty of the Sith. Count Dooku used her as a pawn and got rid of her, and ended up being the one to kill her with Grievous. And the Jedi used her to try to assassinate Count Dooku, and it essentially led to Quinlan Vos turning to the dark side and then her dying. Like, her death had weight, not just for her own character, but just the grand scheme of the Clone Wars. If all of these characters somehow survive the Clone Wars, you just feel like there's less impact to this huge event. I get that the larger fandom isn't going to read a book. Like, I get it. But if you're so interested in telling more stories with this character, tell the original story in animation so more people can see it. You have Tales of the Jedi. Use it to tell the book story. Now, thinking ahead about what they could be potentially setting up moving forward and why even bring her back in the first place. And it feels like, as I mentioned in the beginning, that they're trying to set up this master and apprentice relationship for her and Omega, where Omega will have this decision to either stay with the Bad Batch and live a peaceful life together, or go and train as a Force user with Asajj, because Asajj blatantly says right to their face that she'll either keep being hunted by the Empire or she can make that decision to leave you guys, and that will make her safer. They have playful dialogue between the two. Obviously, Omega's super upbeat and optimistic, while Asajj Ventress is very cold and stoic, so they have completely conflicting personalities. But overall, it feels shoehorned in because Omega has never seemed like she's been on the path to somehow become a Force-sensitive being. I know we've known that Omega is special. I know the concept of a clone having the Force has always been interesting, and people have made fan fiction and headcanon about it. I'm not saying that concept isn't cool, but it just doesn't feel like it was ever set up in this series, and now it's here. The other thing they could potentially be setting up that doesn't have anything to do with Omega and more has to do with Asajj Ventress is that she might be the subject of a future show where we're following Asajj Ventress, who is part bounty hunter, part Force-sensitive being during the Imperial times, which is something we haven't seen before. We've seen Kanan and Ezra and Cal all living as Jedi during the Empire and surviving, but we haven't seen someone on the fringe navigate that, which could be interesting, but I wish it wasn't Asajj Ventress because I loved the way her story wrapped up before. I loved her character in the Clone Wars and then in the Dark Disciple book, but bringing her in here feels wrong. But it's clear she has continued her bounty hunter ways from the later days of the Clone Wars. And then the final kind of far off prediction of what she could potentially be is that she works for the Hidden Path, the secret underground network that helps to protect Force users, and she's this envoy that goes out and tests these children because the Hidden Path obviously doesn't have all the resources in the world, so they're scrounging anyone they can get, and maybe Asajj Ventress feels some connection to these Force-sensitive kids because she was once one of them. She was taken away, and she lost her master, and that's how she ended up becoming a dark side user, and so maybe she wants to prevent that from other children. Maybe she's seen what happens to the people that become Inquisitors. Like, there's a lot of interesting ideas there, but I don't know why she would be a bounty hunter working for the Hidden Path. But the only reason I go on this tangent is because she clearly went there to test someone to see if they are Force sensitive. She was tipped off by Fennec, and when she got there, she was like, let's get to the tests. Let's see if you have a high M count. So I don't know. Those are my predictions for what they might be setting up. Am I thrilled about any of it? No, I am not really sure where they're going with the rest of the season. This was just like a big road bump for me in this season that I thought was pretty strong so far. They didn't clear out all of the issues I've ever had with Bad Batch, but it seemed really focused. It had a lot of really good character moments. They cut back on the monster of the week a little more than usual. But I this is the first time I really just don't agree with the show's direction at this point. But we have 8 episodes left, I believe. So, I mean, there's a lot of different ways this story can go. I'm only going off of this one. And maybe I'll be proved wrong in the future, but I'm standing pretty firm on the fact that I think this was a mistake to bring Asajj Ventress out. And if this ends up working out in 5 to 10 years, and you guys want to call me out for that, fine. But I think right now, I think I'm on the right side here. I guess talking broader on the episode as a whole, I think, like I mentioned, the pacing felt odd. I feel like we were 5 minutes in and she was already making Omega do these Jedi tests, running to the top of the hill to grab a flower, even though like Asajj Ventress just got there. Like, why would she know that there's this white flower? And then they go out on the boat and do the connecting with the animals thing, which again felt so rushed because Omega has never shown signs of being Force sensitive, just like this random tip-off blood test. I get the test is to see if she's Force sensitive, but it felt like they were trying to kind of draw on the inspiration of Luke on Dagobah, being very skeptical about the Force and all this stuff, and doing these like seemingly irrelevant tests with Yoda where he's just doing handstands, lifting rocks, running through the forest, and he's like, why am I doing all this? And Omega says kind of the same thing, but it just kind of feels contrived here when they're on the boat and Omega sits down and says, what do you know about all this stuff? It was just like, I know exactly how this scene is going to play out. I've seen it before. She's going to say, oh, how should I trust you? What have you ever done? And then the master goes and steps out and raises their hand and shows the student, and the student's like, whoa, I didn't know that was going to happen. Us as the audience, we knew it was going to happen. It wasn't surprising. It wasn't profound. It wasn't this like beautiful moment like Yoda lifting the X-Wing out of the water, or Kanan subduing the spiders while he was blind. All of those were just so much more nuanced and beautifully done. This just felt derivative of Star Wars we've already seen done 5 times worse. So I just didn't feel anything from these moments either. I could keep going about why I didn't like this episode, but I think I've made my point. There's very little I did like about this episode. It was cool seeing Ventress's voice actor come back. She's always had a commanding presence, which I always enjoyed, but it really just comes down to the decisions they made here that I simply don't agree with, and I think hurt the canon of Star Wars that has been established. I think as a book fan, it really is a slap in the face to us and the medium of storytelling that is for Star Wars. And I'm just very confused about how this can really align with Dark Disciple, the book, like the creator said, and still pay respect to it, while also moving forward with this new story that they're telling, with Asajj Ventress being a cat with multiple lives through some sort of Night Sister revival magic that I'm sure will get explained. It might not be in Bad Batch. It might be in a future series. But yeah, as you can tell, very disappointed with this episode. Curious to see what they're doing for the rest of this season. Yeah, that's all I got. Let me know what you guys thought. If you guys have read Dark Disciple, if you've watched a lore video about it on YouTube because you didn't want to read it, I want to hear what you guys think of Asajj Ventress's return. Were you as bothered by it as me? Are you excited to have her back and you want to see more Ventress and you didn't like that she died in Dark Disciple? I want to hear all of it, and you could do that on my Instagram at @star_wars_mark of balance. DM me and we could talk some Star Wars, talk some Asajj Ventress returning and book canon being undercut. But as always, thank you guys so much for listening. Leave a like or comment or review on whatever streaming platform you're listening to on. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy, and may the Force be with you. Peace.